Death doesn't come with a white light or a peaceful choir. It tastes like bitter almonds and burnt sugar. I know, because I choked on it while my fiancé watched. But then my eyes snapped open, my fingers wrapping around that same crystal glass. I was still breathing. Sweat beaded at the nape of my neck, freezing instantly in the air-conditioned chill of the Waldorf Astoria ballroom. My fingers were locked around the slender stem of a crystal champagne flute. Champagne bubbled happily against the rim, golden and completely innocuous. To my left stood Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling Communications, engaged in a heated, whispered debate with a senator. To my right was Beatrice, my best friend, my assistant, and directly across the high-top table, adjusting his silk tie, was Simon, my fiancé. Bile rose in my throat. Just moments ago, or was it a lifetime ago, I had raised this exact glass to my lips. I had been parched from running around, coordinating the 25th anniversary gala. Richard had been distracted, waving away the tray Beatrice offered. I had simply reached over, picked up the glass closest to me, and swallowed a generous gulp. I remembered the agonizing fire. It hadn't been a swift cinematic death. It was a brutal, searing tearing of my esophagus. I remembered collapsing onto the polished marble floor, my vision tunneling. And in those final, suffocating seconds, I hadn't seen panic in Simon's eyes. I had seen relief. I had seen Beatrice's hand subtly slide into his, their fingers interlacing as they stood over my convulsing body. Now the music was playing again, a jazz quartet covering a Sinatra classic, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of high society laughter. It was deafening. I was back. Somehow, the universe had hit rewind, depositing me at the exact millisecond before my demise. "Chloe, darling, you look flushed," Simon said, his voice dripping with that familiar, warm concern, the same concern he had weaponized against me for 3 years. "Are you all right? You should drink something. You've been running yourself ragged all night." He gestured subtly toward the glass in my hand, the glass meant for Richard. I stared at him, really looked at him, the slight crinkle at the corners of his hazel eyes, the perfect swoop of his ash blonde hair. He was beautiful, and he was a monster. "Chloe?" Beatrice chimed in, stepping closer. Her perfume, a cloying floral scent, made my stomach churn. "Is everything okay? The boss is waiting for the toast." I looked down at the bubbling liquid. If I drank it, I died. If I gave it to Richard, he died. And Beatrice and Simon would walk away clean, likely funded by whoever paid them to assassinate one of the most powerful media moguls in the country. I couldn't just put it down. They would notice. They would try again. I needed an accident. "I'm fine," I breathed out, my voice trembling just enough to sell the fatigue, just a little dizzy. I took a step toward Richard, pretending my heel had caught on the thick hem of my silk gown. With a sharp, theatrical gasp, I pitched forward. I didn't brace myself. I let my shoulder slam into the edge of the high-top table. The crystal flute slipped from my grasp. Time seemed to slow down as it tumbled through the air, flashing under the chandeliers, before shattering spectacularly against the marble floor. The golden liquid splashed outward, soaking the hem of Beatrice's custom Givenchy gown and splattering across Richard's polished Oxford shoes. "Good God, Chloe," Richard barked, stepping back rapidly, brushing at his trousers. "I am so sorry, Mr. Sterling," I stammered, dropping to my knees amidst the shattered glass. My hands were shaking, but this time it was from adrenaline, not poison. "My heel, I just lost my balance. It's my fault." "My dress," Beatrice shrieked, her carefully cultivated professional demeanor cracking for a fraction of a second. She glared at me, and in that fleeting look I saw it, pure, unadulterated venom. She wasn't just mad about the dress. She was furious that the payload hadn't been delivered. "Leave it, Chloe," Simon said quickly, grabbing my arm to haul me up. His grip was entirely too tight. It bruised. "The custodial staff will get it. You're making a scene." "Let the girl breathe, Simon," Richard intervened. He pulled a pristine linen handkerchief from his pocket and surprisingly handed it to me. His sharp gray eyes analyzed me, missing nothing. Richard hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by being oblivious. Are you ill, Chloe? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just exhausted, sir. I apologize for the clumsiness. As I spoke, I deliberately dropped the handkerchief over a concentrated puddle of the spilled champagne. I pressed my palm against it, soaking the linen before covertly palming it and stuffing it into my clutch. Evidence. Take the rest of the night off. Beatrice can handle the closing remarks, Richard commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Simon, take her home. Simon's jaw tightened, a microscopic flex of muscle. Of course, Richard. Come on, Chloe. As Simon guided me out of the ballroom, his hand a heavy, possessive weight on the small of my back, I glanced over my shoulder. Beatrice was staring after us, her face pale, frantically texting on her phone. Beside her, a waiter was already sweeping up the shards of glass. I had survived the night, but the war had just begun. The town car ride back to our shared penthouse in Tribeca was agonizingly silent. The rain had started to fall, slicking the neon-lit streets of Manhattan. Simon sat beside me, scrolling through his phone. He was too quiet. The Simon I thought I knew would have been chattering away, making jokes about Beatrice's ruined dress, asking if I needed a foot rub. This Simon was calculating. He was regrouping. Did you see who the waiter was? Simon asked suddenly, breaking the silence. He didn't look up from his screen. What waiter? I asked, playing dumb. I rested my head against the cool glass of the window, fighting the urge to flinch when he finally turned his gaze toward me. The one who handed Beatrice the drinks tray, he said smoothly. I just thought it was odd. He seemed unfamiliar. A temp, maybe? He was fishing. He wanted to know if I suspected anything or if he needed to cover their tracks regarding the supplier of the poison. I wasn't paying attention, Sai. I've been coordinating a guest list of 500 people. Every waiter looks the same to me right now. He reached over, brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His touch made my skin crawl, a physical revulsion I had to violently suppress. You just need some rest. You've been working too hard for Sterling. He doesn't appreciate you, Chloe. You know that, right? You're killing yourself for a company that would replace you tomorrow. No, I thought, looking into his beautiful lying eyes. You're the one trying to kill me. Or rather, you were trying to kill him, and you didn't care if I got caught in the crossfire. Maybe you're right, I whispered, leaning into his touch just enough to sell the lie. Maybe I should start looking for an exit strategy. A subtle smirk touched his lips. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Let's just get you to bed. That night was a masterclass in psychological torture. I lay rigid on my side of the king-sized mattress, listening to the steady, rhythmic breathing of the man who had conspired to murder my boss and stood by as I died in an alternate timeline. Every time he shifted in his sleep, every time his arm brushed against mine, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I waited until the digital clock on the nightstand read 3:14 a.m. Moving with agonizing slowness, I slipped out from under the duvet. I grabbed my clutch from the vanity and crept into the master bathroom, locking the door behind me with a soft, barely audible click. I turned on the sink faucet to a low trickle to mask any noise, then opened the clutch. The linen handkerchief was still damp, smelling faintly of citrus, yeast, and something else, something sharply metallic. Bitter almonds. Cyanide? Or something more exotic, untraceable. I needed a talk screen. Fortunately, my position as Richard's executive assistant wasn't just scheduling tea times. I handled highly confidential logistics, which meant I had contacts. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart, one that belonged to a private investigator Richard retained for corporate espionage cases, a man named Gregory Pierce. He answered on the third ring. Do you know what time it is, Chloe? A gruff, gravelly voice muttered. I need a favor, Pierce. Off the books, not a word to Richard. Silence on the line. Then the rustle of sheets. I charge double for secrets kept from the man who pays my retainer. I'll wire it from my personal account. I have a cloth soaked in a liquid. I need a full chemical breakdown by noon tomorrow. I think someone brought a highly lethal synthetic toxin into the gala tonight. Jesus. Was it used? Almost, I whispered, staring at my pale reflection in the bathroom mirror. Pick it up from locker 402 at the Grand Central Terminal at 7 a.m. And Pierce, if this comes back as what I think it is, I'm going to need you to dig into Beatrice Cole and Simon Hayes. Your assistant and your fiancé? Pierce let out a low whistle. You're having a hell of a week, kid. I'll get it done. I hung up, sealing the handkerchief in a plastic Ziploc bag I kept in my toiletry kit. By the time the sun began to peek over the East River, painting the skyline in bruised shades of purple and orange, I was already dressed and out the door. I left a sticky note on the coffee maker for Simon. Early crisis at the office regarding the gala fallout. Love you. See you tonight. I didn't go to the office. Not yet. I went to a 2-4 hour internet cafe in Queens, paying in cash for a terminal in the back corner. If Simon and Beatrice were working together to kill Richard Sterling, they were leaving a digital footprint. Simon was a hedge fund manager, brilliant with money, but arrogant. Beatrice was cunning, but she was deeply in debt from keeping up appearances. I logged into a secure backdoor of the Sterling media server, a backdoor Richard himself had me set up months ago for emergency access. I started cross-referencing Beatrice's internal emails and her corporate expense accounts. It took 2 hours of digging, but I found the anomaly. It wasn't an email, it was a calendar invite. 3 weeks ago, Beatrice had booked a private dining room at Le Bernardin under a shell corporation name associated with Sterling Media. I hacked into the restaurant's reservation system. The guest listed alongside Beatrice wasn't a client. It was Dominic Blackwood. My blood ran cold. Dominic Blackwood was the CEO of Vanguard Media, Richard's most vicious competitor, a man who had publicly sworn to dismantle Richard's empire piece by piece. Beatrice wasn't just trying to kill Richard for a promotion. She was selling the entire company out to a corporate warlord. And Simon, with his hedge fund connections, was likely structuring the massive short sale of Sterling Media stock that would follow Richard's sudden, tragic demise. They were going to make billions, and I was supposed to be collateral damage. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Pierce. Got the package. Preliminary test is throwing red flags. It's a cardiac arrest inducer. Colorless, almost odorless. Traces of aconitine. It mimics a massive heart attack. Nasty stuff, Chloe. You owe me. I stared at the screen, the reality of my situation settling over me like a suffocating blanket. I hadn't just survived a mistake. I had walked into a meticulously planned assassination involving corporate espionage, millions of dollars, and the two people I trusted most in the world. They thought I was just the naive, overworked assistant. They thought I was a pawn they could maneuver around their chessboard. I closed the laptop, a cold, hard resolve solidifying in my chest. I had died once as their pawn. This time, I was playing to kill. Sunlight violently pierced the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sterling Communications lobby, mocking the cold, hollow cavern my chest had become. Walking into the building felt like stepping onto a battlefield armed with nothing but a smile and a secret. I swiped my badge, the familiar beep echoing in my ears, and stepped into the executive elevator. When the doors slid open on the 50th floor, Beatrice was already at her desk, aggressively typing. She wore a pristine white blazer, looking every bit the polished, indispensable confidant. The sight of her made my blood turn to ice. Yesterday, I would have brought her a matcha latte and complained about wedding planning. Today, I knew she had plotted to step over my convulsing body to get a corner office. "Morning, Chloe," Beatrice sang out, her voice a perfectly modulated hum of feigned sympathy. "I was so worried about you last night. Simon said you practically collapsed when you got home. Are you sure you should be here?" "I wouldn't miss today for the world, Bea," I replied, my voice steady, though my fingernails dug half-moons into the leather of my handbag. It was just a dizzy spell, Mister. Sterling needs the quarterly reports finalized, and you know how he gets if the formatting is off. Beatrice offered a tight, condescending smile. "Well, don't push yourself. I can take over the briefing with Richard this morning if you need to rest." "I'm perfectly fine," I said, walking past her desk. "But thank you for caring." I entered Richard's office and locked the heavy oak door behind me. Richard Sterling was standing by the window, a silhouette against the Manhattan skyline, speaking rapid-fire French into his earpiece. When he finished, he tapped the device and turned to me, his sharp gray eyes instantly registering the grim set of my jaw. "You look terrible, Chloe," he noted bluntly, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk. "I thought I told Simon to ensure you rested." I didn't sit down. I walked directly to his desk, reached into my bag, and pulled out a thick manila envelope I had compiled at the internet cafe. I tossed it onto the polished wood between us. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, Richard," I started, dropping the formalities. "And I need you to trust me more than you ever have in the 5 years I've run your life." Richard raised a silver eyebrow, clearly taken aback by my tone, but he didn't reprimand me. He slid the envelope toward him and opened the clasp. "Last night wasn't an accident," I stated flatly, pacing the length of his Persian rug. "The glass I dropped, the one meant for you, was laced with a synthetic cardiac arrest inducer. Traces of aconitine. It was designed to mimic a massive heart attack. Untraceable, unless you specifically know what to look for." Richard's hand stilled over the papers. The color slowly drained from his face, but his composure remained ironclad. "Who?" "Beatrice," I said, the name tasting like ash. "And Simon. They're working with Dominic Blackwood." I walked him through the evidence. The shell company, the clandestine meetings at RebornByReturn, the private investigator's toxicology report. I explained the financial motive. Blackwood wanted Sterling Media decapitated to trigger a hostile takeover, while Simon was leveraging his hedge fund to orchestrate a massive short sale of Sterling stock. They were going to short the company into the ground the minute Richard's heart attack hit the news, making billions on the company's collapse. Richard was silent for a long time. He meticulously reviewed the printed emails, the reservation logs, the talk screen. When he finally looked up, there was no fear in his eyes, only absolute, terrifying fury. It was the look of a titan realizing rats were gnawing at his throne. "They thought they could dismantle me from the inside," Richard murmured, his voice dangerously soft. "Using my own assistant and your fiancé. It's almost poetic. Almost—" "We can call the police," I suggested, though I knew the answer. "No," Richard snapped, standing up. "Attempted murder is hard to prove with a shattered glass and a damp rag. Blackwood has enough lawyers to bury this for a decade, and Simon would just claim ignorance. If we strike now, we merely survive." A predatory smile spread across Richard's face. "I don't just want to survive, Chloe. I want them ruined. I want them begging on the streets of the financial district." "How?" "We give them exactly what they want," Richard said, walking over to his private bar and pouring 2 fingers of scotch. Despite it being 9 in the morning, he handed one to me. "We give them a dying king." Over the next 2 weeks, my life became an Oscar-worthy performance. I played the doting fiancé to Simon, letting him kiss me, letting him hold me, all while my skin crawled. I played the oblivious colleague to Beatrice, helping her organize meetings and smiling through her passive-aggressive jabs. Behind closed doors, Richard and I constructed a labyrinth of lies. We started leaking carefully curated rumors. I forged medical documents from a prestigious Swiss oncology clinic and accidentally left a copy on the office copier, just long enough for Beatrice to spot it. The documents detailed a grim, terminal pancreatic cancer diagnosis for Richard Sterling, indicating he had less than a month to live. Simultaneously, Richard began acting erratic. He canceled public appearances. He looked paler, thanks to a makeup artist I smuggled into the building through the freight elevator. He started transferring minor assets, making it look like a man putting his affairs in order. The bait worked perfectly. Through my backdoor access to Beatrice's computer, I watched her furiously relaying the information to Blackwood and Simon. The trap was set. Believing Richard was about to drop dead naturally, they abandoned their assassination attempts, opting instead to accelerate their financial guillotine. Simon's hedge fund, alongside Blackwood's shadow investors, began heavily shorting Sterling Media stock. They were borrowing millions of shares, selling them at the current high price, fully expecting the stock to crash to zero when Richard died, allowing them to buy the shares back for pennies and pocket the astronomical difference. "They're over-leveraging," I told Richard late one night in his office, staring at a Bloomberg terminal. "Simon has committed 70% of his fund's capital to this short position. If our stock price goes up instead of down, he won't just lose money. He'll face margin calls he can't pay. He will be completely wiped out." Richard smiled, adjusting his cuffs. Then it's time to announce our new acquisition. Friday morning arrived with the heavy, humid weight of an impending thunderstorm. This was the day of the quarterly board meeting. Beatrice had manipulated the schedule so that Dominic Blackwood would be waiting in a suite at the Pierre Hotel, ready to launch his hostile takeover bid the moment Richard's resignation due to failing health was announced to the board. Simon had texted me that morning, kissing my forehead before he left for Wall Street. "Big day today, babe. We're going to be celebrating tonight. Wear that red dress I like." I wore black. At 10 a.m., the Sterling Media boardroom was packed. 12 board members, Beatrice and myself. The air was thick with tension. Beatrice had practically vibrated out of her chair all morning, her eyes constantly darting toward Richard, waiting for the frail, dying man to surrender his empire. Richard walked in at 2 a.m. He didn't look pale, he didn't look frail, he looked like a god of war. He strode to the head of the long mahogany table, radiating an aggressive, overwhelming vitality. Beatrice's smile faltered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice booming across the silent room. "I know there have been whispers regarding my health, rumors of illness. Let me assure you, I have never been healthier." I watched Beatrice's hand twitch toward her phone, panic suddenly flashing in her eyes. "In fact," Richard continued, pressing a button on a remote that lowered a massive projection screen behind him, "I have been using this time out of the public eye to negotiate the most aggressive expansion in this company's history." The screen flashed to life, displaying a signed, legally binding merger agreement. As of 9:30 this morning, Sterling Media has successfully acquired Apex Global, the primary content distribution network that our esteemed rival Vanguard Media relies upon for 80% of its international broadcasting. The boardroom erupted into chaotic, stunned applause. My eyes were locked on Beatrice. All the color had drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax mannequin. She understood instantly what this meant. Blackwood hadn't just failed to take over Sterling Media. His own company had just been functionally neutered. "The markets are already reacting," Richard yelled over the din, gesturing to a live ticker on the secondary screen. Sterling Media stock wasn't dropping. It was skyrocketing. It was a vertical green line, climbing higher by the second. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out under the table. It was Simon. "Chloe, what the hell is happening? Call me now." I silenced the phone and slipped out of the boardroom amidst the celebratory chaos. I walked down the hall to my office, my heart pounding a steady, triumphant rhythm. Beatrice followed me out a moment later, her breathing shallow, her eyes wide with terror. "Chloe," she gasped, grabbing my arm. "What did he do?" "The cancer." "There was no cancer, Bea," I said smoothly, stepping out of her grip. Just like there was no clumsy accident at the Waldorf. She froze. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "I know," I whispered, stepping closer to her, letting her see the cold, hard reality in my eyes. "I know about the aconitine. I know about Le Bernardin. I know about Blackwood." Before she could speak, the elevator doors at the end of the hall chimed. 2 uniformed police officers stepped out, flanked by Gregory Pierce, the private investigator, wearing a rumpled trench coat and a grim smile. "Beatrice Cole?" one of the officers asked, approaching us. Beatrice stumbled backward, shaking her head. No, this is a mistake. Richard, Mr. Sterling has already provided us with the toxicology report, the security footage from the gala, and records of corporate espionage," the officer said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and corporate fraud." "Chloe, please!" Beatrice shrieked as the cold metal snapped around her wrists. "You're my best friend. It was Simon's idea. He made me do it." I watched them drag her toward the elevators, her designer heels dragging against the carpet. I didn't feel a shred of pity. I walked back into my office and finally picked up my phone. I had 42 missed calls from Simon. I dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. "Chloe, thank God!" Simon's voice was a hysterical, ragged pitch. "The stock is surging. I'm being margin called. The prime brokers are liquidating my entire fund. I'm ruined. I need to get a hold of Richard. Simon," I interrupted, my voice perfectly calm. "What?" Chloe, you don't understand. I'm losing everything. I understand perfectly, I said, leaning against the glass wall of my office, looking out over the city. The police just arrested Beatrice. She's currently explaining to them how you procured the aconitine for the Waldorf Gala. Dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his ragged breathing. I died that night, Simon, I whispered, the memory of the burning throat and the fading light flashing behind my eyes. In another life, I drank that glass, and you watched me choke on the marble floor. You traded my life for money. Chloe, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? He stammered, his voice trembling with a terrifying realization that he was completely trapped. I love you. The authorities are on their way to your office right now. I suggest you don't run. It will only make the sentencing worse. I hung up the phone and dropped it into the trash can. An hour later, Richard walked into my office. The adrenaline of the boardroom victory had settled into a quiet, profound calm. He looked at the empty desk where Beatrice used to sit, then looked at me. Blackwood is resigning by the end of the day, Richard said, pouring us both a fresh cup of coffee. And I just got off the phone with the DA. They have Simon in custody. He tried to shred his hard drives, which only added obstruction to his charges. It's over, I breathed, feeling the phantom burn in my throat finally, truly fade away. Not quite, Richard said, pulling a sleek, leather-bound folder from his jacket. He set it on my desk. I need a new chief operating officer, someone who understands the absolute worst of human nature and knows how to destroy it. I looked at the contract. The salary was astronomical, but the power it represented was priceless. I wasn't an assistant anymore. I wasn't a pawn. I picked up the solid gold pen on my desk. When do I start? Death had tasted like bitter almonds, but rebirth tasted exactly like victory. Enjoyed this story? Hit that like button to support the channel, share this video with someone who loves a good revenge plot, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling audio dramas. Drop a comment below, what would you do if you were reborn in Chloe's shoes?